Welcome back to Minimalist Living Lab. I'm Evan Hart, and today I want to ask you a quiet but piercing question. Are you consuming your life or creating it? Let's pause there. We live in a world wired for consumption. Scroll, swipe, tap, buy, watch, repeat. From the moment we wake up, we're presented with choices not to create, but to consume. A podcast, a product, a new show, a snack, a new opinion to be outraged about. But what if fulfillment doesn't live on that side of the equation? What if the deepest human satisfaction doesn't come from having, but from becoming? Let's begin with a truth that hides in plain sight. Most of us were born into a system that never asked who we are, only what we'll buy. From our earliest memories, the world began to whisper, and sometimes shout, that happiness, worth, and identity were just one purchase away. We were handed catalogs before we could read, fed commercials before we could speak. We were rewarded not for being, but for wanting. Wanting more. Wanting newer. Wanting now. But here's the trap. The system isn't designed to ever let you arrive. It's designed to keep you moving. From one desire to the next. One upgrade to another. A better body, a smarter home, a faster phone, a trendier outfit, a perfectly curated life. You're not just buying things. You're buying stories. Stories that tell you you're behind. You're missing out. You could be more if only you had this. And so, you consume. Not just products, but images. Not just content, but comparisons. Not just food, but fleeting comfort. The result? A full cart and an empty spirit. This is the quiet lie of modern life. That consumption equals fulfillment. That the next thing will fix the ache. That external upgrades will solve internal unrest. But deep down, we know better. Because if consumption were truly the answer, we would have arrived by now. Yet studies show we're more anxious than ever, more distracted, more disconnected from ourselves. Not because we lack abundance, but because we've been mistaking abundance for aliveness. Let me say that again. We've been mistaking abundance for aliveness. More doesn't always mean better. Full shelves don't guarantee a full life. And here's the paradox. The more we consume, the less we notice. We numb. We distract. We dilute the quiet voice inside us, the one asking deeper questions. Am I living on purpose? Do I feel at peace with who I'm becoming? Is this how I want to spend my one and only life? Consumption, unchecked, becomes a spiritual fog. It clouds our ability to feel joy in simple things. It erodes our sensitivity to beauty. It disconnects us from the wisdom of our own inner world. It's not just about cluttered homes, it's about cluttered souls. We're so full of stuff, we no longer know what truly satisfies. Now, let's be clear. Consuming isn't the enemy. We all need to consume. Food, information, inspiration, even entertainment. There is nothing inherently wrong with enjoying what the world offers. But the danger is when consumption becomes a default identity. When it replaces curiosity. When it replaces creation. When it replaces presence. And most of all, when it replaces you. Because here's what's truly at stake. The more we define ourselves by what we consume, the more we forget that we were made to contribute, to shape, to build, to give, to express, to create. So, before we can step into that creator identity, we have to wake up to the silent hypnosis of consumption. We have to recognize how often we reach for our phones. Not out of intention, but out of reflex. How often we buy to soothe, scroll to numb, and snack to fill a space that was never physical to begin with. We have to become aware of the patterns, the habits, the voids we're trying to fill. Because only when we see clearly can we begin to choose differently. And maybe that's the first act of creation. Not building something new, but simply noticing. Noticing the lie. Noticing the fatigue that comes from overconsumption. Noticing the quiet longing for something richer. Because you are not just a consumer. You are not a pair of eyes for ads. You are not a data point for an algorithm. You are a soul. Capable of wonder. Longing for depth. Made for meaningful expression. And maybe, just maybe, what you've been hungering for this whole time can't be bought. It must be built. From the inside out. So now that we've seen the lie, that endless consumption never truly satisfies, we ask the natural next question. What's the alternative? And the answer is quietly powerful. Creation. To shift from consumer to creator isn't just a change in action. It's a change in identity. A change in posture toward life. It's the difference between standing outside your own story versus picking up the pen and writing the next page. Let's be honest. Most people never make this shift. Not because they lack talent. Not because they don't care. But because they've never been told. You are allowed to create. They think creation belongs to the artists. The painters, the poets, the designers, the influencers. But I want you to hear this. Deeply, truly. Every human being is a creator. Including you. If you've ever nurtured something, you're a creator. If you've ever brought an idea to life, you're a creator. If you've ever solved a problem, grown a garden, written a letter, comforted a child, you've practiced the sacred art of creation. And here's the truth that changed my life. You don't need a canvas. Your life is the canvas. A creator isn't someone who always produces big things. It's someone who sees possibility in small spaces. Someone who responds to life with presence instead of passivity. Someone who asks not just, what can I get? But what can I give? Not just what can I absorb? But what can I shape? And when you begin to live this way, you start to notice something quietly profound. Your inner world begins to fill. Because creation, unlike consumption, connects you to something within. It taps into your natural desire to participate, to bring value, to express something real. And in a world of noise, that authenticity is revolutionary. Let's bring this closer to home. When you make time to write a journal entry instead of endlessly scrolling, you're creating. When you rearrange a corner of your home to feel more peaceful, you're creating. When you cook a meal, not just to feed, but to nourish and connect, you're creating. When you build a habit, plant a seed, speak an encouraging word, you're not just doing something useful. You're shaping the texture of your life. You're stepping back into your rightful role. Not as a spectator, but as the artist. And here's what creators understand. And consumers often forget. Creation isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's okay if what you make is messy. It's okay if no one claps. It's okay if it never gets shared on social media. Because the act of creating isn't just for them. It's for you. It tells your nervous system, I'm alive. It tells your mind, I have agency. It tells your spirit, you matter. You are not just a reaction. You are a response. This is the gateway to inner fulfillment. Not the kind that fades after a dopamine hit, but the kind that grows quietly, patiently. Every time you choose to engage instead of escape. Creation reminds us. You are not helpless in your own story. You are not at the mercy of the algorithm. You are not just a passenger on this ride called life. You are the one holding the chisel, the thread, the voice, the light. You are the one who can take what's been given to you and make something more. More honest. More intentional. More you. And that is the moment where fulfillment begins. Let's pause here. Take a breath. And ask a quiet question. What does fulfillment actually feel like? Not success. Not status. not excitement. Fulfillment. It's a softer word, but it holds more weight than most of the louder ones. Because fulfillment isn't about what's happening around you. It's about what's happening within you. It's not loud, not shiny. It doesn't announce itself with flashing lights or viral moments. Instead, it arrives like this. You wake up and realize you're not at war with yourself. You go to bed knowing your time was spent with meaning. You breathe, and something inside you says, yes, this matters. But here's the truth many people miss. Fulfillment isn't something you find. It's something you grow. We live in a culture obsessed with seeking the next thing, the better feeling, the perfect formula. And so we treat fulfillment like it's somewhere out there. As if it's hidden in a retreat, a new relationship, a book, a product, a lifestyle, a better city. But you know what's wild? You can have all of those things and still feel empty. And you can have very little and feel completely at peace. Because fulfillment doesn't live in the things. It lives in the process, the rhythm, the being. And more specifically, it grows strongest in the soil of creation. Think about it. When have you felt most alive? Most grounded? Most at home in your own skin? I'd wager it wasn't after a shopping spree. Or finishing a 10-hour Netflix binge. Or buying something new you didn't need. I'd guess it was after you finished something that mattered. Maybe you wrote something honest. Maybe you helped someone without being asked. Maybe you spent an hour tending your space, your garden, your craft. Those moments, simple as they are not small. They are sacred. They are evidence that fulfillment doesn't come from consuming, but from contributing, from aligning your actions with your essence. Here's a helpful image. Imagine your inner world like a garden. Every act of creation, no matter how tiny, is like watering that garden. It doesn't bloom overnight. But give it time, consistency, attention. And slowly, quietly, it begins to flourish. You won't always feel it in the moment. But weeks from now, months from now, you'll notice. You're more grounded in your own values. You're less shaken by outside noise. You no longer need as much to feel enough. You carry a quiet joy that isn't loud, but unshakable. That's inner fulfillment. Not explosive, but anchoring. And here's the irony. The world will rarely reward you for pursuing this kind of joy. Because it can't monetize it. It doesn't trend. It's not flashy. But it frees you. It gives you back your time. Your energy. Your soul. It lets you sit in a room alone and still feel full. It lets you walk through life without needing everyone's validation. It gives you a way of living that's yours, deeply, unmistakably yours. And perhaps the most beautiful part? It spills over. Because fulfilled people don't hoard peace. They radiate it. They inspire. They uplift. They create spaces where others can rest, reflect, and grow too. So if you've been chasing something, and you're tired, exhausted by the hunt, disoriented by the noise, maybe it's time to stop seeking and start sowing. Maybe it's time to stop asking, where can I find fulfillment? And start asking, what am I quietly growing today? A moment of stillness. A word of kindness. A 5-minute act of creation. A small ritual that aligns you with who you want to be. These are the seeds. And with time, they grow. And one day, without fanfare, you'll look around inside yourself and whisper, I'm home. So far, we've peeled back the curtain on the quiet lie of consumption. We've remembered our nature as creators. And we've begun to understand that fulfillment is something we grow, not chase. But let's bring it down to where life is actually lived. In the small, ordinary moments of the day. Because transformation, real, lasting, soul-deep change, doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't happen in a single revelation. It begins, almost imperceptibly, in the moment you choose a different path, when the old reflex whispers consume, and instead, you create. And that moment? It's often quiet, uncelebrated, unseen. But it is the beginning of everything. Let me give you an example. You've had a long day. You sit on the couch. Your phone is within reach. It would be so easy, so normal, to open an app and scroll. Mindlessly. Endlessly. It's familiar. It's comforting in a numb kind of way. But what if, just once, you pause? You breathe. And you ask a different question. What would nourish me right now, not just distract me? And maybe, instead of scrolling, you reach for a journal and jot down 3 things you noticed today. Maybe you pick up that half-finished sketch or paragraph you abandoned last week. Maybe you sit in silence and sip a cup of tea, noticing the steam, the weight of the mug, the feeling of being alive. That single moment? You just took a step. From consumer to creator. From unconsciousness to awareness. From reaction to choice. And here's what I want you to hear. That one step matters. Because the shift isn't a leap. It's a practice. A quiet revolution that happens one micro-decision at a time. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You don't need to move to the mountains or delete all your apps or change careers tomorrow. You just need to begin noticing. And choosing. And then doing it again. And again. Because change doesn't come from doing something once with intensity. It comes from doing something small, with consistency. So what does this look like in real life? You pause before buying something and ask, do I actually need this, or am I trying to fill a void? You carve out 20 minutes a day to create something, anything, with no pressure to perform. You build micro-rituals of intentionality into your day. A moment of silence before a meal. A 5-minute reflection before bed. A walk without your phone. You let go of multitasking and begin single-tasking, giving your full presence to what's in front of you. You choose depth over noise, substance over speed, soul over spectacle. And little by little, without even realizing it, you begin to feel different. Not in the way you feel after a motivational speech, but in the way a stone feels different after years of being shaped by water. Something soft and persistent within you begins to sculpt something solid and sacred. And one day, maybe on a Tuesday morning, in the middle of washing the dishes or walking the dog or finishing a sentence in your notebook, you'll catch yourself smiling for no reason. Not because something big happened, but because you feel rooted, connected, aligned. You'll realize that the shift you thought would be hard and dramatic actually felt like coming home. Coming home to your presence, to your creativity, to the version of you that's awake, engaged, alive. And here's the beauty of that shift. It doesn't just change what you do. It changes who you believe you are. So if this process feels slow, good. That's how you know it's real. Because lasting transformation never rushes. It grows. It deepens. It becomes. And all you have to do today, tomorrow, always, is show up for the next moment with a little less noise and a little more intention. Step by step, breath by breath, you become the creator of a life that feels full, not because it's packed, but because it's yours. There comes a moment, somewhere along this quiet journey from consumer to creator, when something clicks. You begin to realize you're not just someone who reacts to life. You're someone who shapes it. You are not just living in a story. You are writing one. Line by line. Choice by choice. Day by day. And that realization? It's the moment you shift. From being a passive participant to becoming an artist. Let's talk about what that really means. Because when we hear artist, we think paintbrush, gallery, piano, poem. But here's a more powerful truth. To be an artist is to live with intention. To create not only beauty, but meaning. To take the raw materials of life, time, space, struggle, joy, breath, and compose something authentic from them. Your canvas is your day. Your brush is your attention. Your medium is how you show up. To your relationships, your thoughts, your space, yourself. And every time you choose to live deliberately, you're painting. Every time you say no to the noise, and yes to something real, you're sculpting. Every time you forgive, every time you notice beauty, every time you pause, reflect, or care, you're weaving a tapestry only you could make. And no one may ever see it. But you will feel it. You'll feel it in the gentleness of your mornings, in the honesty of your conversations, in the peace of a home that feels like your own sanctuary, in the rituals that anchor you, not because they're grand, but because they're yours. You'll feel it in the silence you no longer rush to fill, in the presence you bring to the ordinary, in the quiet pride of knowing, I'm not living someone else's life anymore. I'm living mine. Here's something I love to remind myself. Minimalism is the art of subtraction for the sake of beauty. And so is life. It's not about doing less for the sake of doing less. It's about removing what's false, excessive, and performative. So what's true can breathe. When you live like this, you become more than efficient. You become elegant. Not in fashion. In spirit. You begin to recognize your own rhythm. And more importantly, you begin to trust it. The artist within you doesn't chase trends. They follow truth. They honor what's real, even if it's quiet, even if it's slow, even if it's unseen. Because here's the paradox. The more you create from authenticity, the less you crave validation. You're no longer living for the gallery. You're living for the work itself. And that is freedom. So ask yourself, what kind of art is my life becoming? What colors am I choosing today? In my attitude, in my actions, in my tone? What shapes am I drawing? Through the habits I repeat, the words I speak, the spaces I nurture? What beauty am I crafting? Not just for others to admire, but for my soul to rest in? Because you don't need to become someone new. You need to return to the one who was always there. The one who knew how to dream, how to build, how to notice, how to feel. The one who could turn a stick into a sword, a box into a spaceship, a moment into magic. That child is still here. Still waiting. Still wondering if you'll slow down long enough to let them speak again. So let this be your permission. To become the artist of your own life. To live on purpose, not autopilot. To create with your hours, not just consume them. To find joy not in performance, but in presence. And above all, to remember this. You are not a product. You are a process. And every day, you are becoming. Shape it. Color it. Name it. Make it yours. So now you've heard the call. The invitation isn't just to do more. It's to become more. Not through excess. Not through accumulation. But through intentional creation. And maybe, just maybe, you're asking, if I shift my identity, if I choose to create more than I consume, what will I really gain? It's a fair question. Because when you begin this journey, it can feel like you're giving things up. And you are. You're giving up distraction as comfort. You're giving up noise as a numbing agent. You're giving up the illusion that more stuff equals more worth. You're giving up the lie that constant input means real engagement with life. But let me tell you something with my whole heart. What you gain is infinitely more powerful. You gain presence. You start waking up in your own life, not just moving through it. You begin to see the texture in ordinary things. The sunlight on the floor. The rhythm of your breath. the way your coffee warms your hand. Moments stop slipping through your fingers. Because you're in them. You gain purpose. Not grand, world-shaking declarations, but quiet clarity. I know what matters to me. I know where I want my energy to go. I'm not just surviving, I'm shaping. You gain sovereignty over your time, your attention, your energy. You start choosing what enters your mind and what exits your mouth. You stop reacting. You begin responding, with grace, with intent, with inner steadiness. You gain self-respect. Because you're keeping promises to yourself. You said you'd write. You wrote. You said you'd pause. You paused. You said you'd create space, and you protected it. That self-trust? It builds. And eventually, it transforms the way you walk through the world. You gain depth. You're no longer grazing the surface of your own life. You're diving in. Exploring what's under the noise, under the patterns, under the expectations. And in that depth, you rediscover a voice you almost forgot was yours. But most of all, you gain a relationship with your own soul. And that changes everything. Because once you feel what it's like to create from a place of alignment, to act from integrity, to choose presence over performance, to live by your own inner compass, you can't unfeel it. You'll begin to crave it. Not out of fear, but out of love. Not because someone told you to, but because something inside you whispered, this is what you were made for. And here's something else no one tells you. Fulfilled people don't need to impress. They're not chasing applause. They don't measure their worth by metrics. They've built a well inside themselves. A quiet one, but deep. They don't need to shout to feel seen. They don't need to hoard to feel safe. They don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. They're not obsessed with looking like they're living. They are actually living. And you can be one of them. So if today is the day you choose to shift, if you decide to pick up the pen again, to open your hands and start shaping your hours instead of consuming them, know this. It won't always be easy, but it will always be worth it. And in time, you'll begin to notice. You're less reactive, more rooted, less frantic, more free, less hungry for more, and more deeply satisfied with enough. Not because you settled, but because you remembered who you really are. A creator, a contributor, an artist of attention, a builder of meaning, a steward of space and soul. So go create something today. Not for validation, not for applause, but for alignment, for joy, for the quiet revolution of reclaiming your life. And when you do, don't just look at what you've made. Look at who you're becoming. Because that is the greatest creation of all. Thank you for sharing this time with me today. As you move through the rest of your day, remember, you don't have to wait for permission to create. You already have everything you need. Start small. Start now. And let your life become the most meaningful thing you've ever made. I'm Evan Hart. And this is Minimalist Living Lab. I'll see you in the next episode.